Good evening, everyone. I am so excited to have you all join us for our continuing education webinars for 2022. And this year we're focusing all about the animals and everything that we can do to be better pet sitters and dog walkers. So tonight, for our second installment, we are going to have Jade. She is going to be talking to us about nutrition. So Jade, please take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me today in this. I'm a huge fan of NAPPS. So I'm glad you guys have all been able to take the time tonight to come and join me. We're going to unpack some nutrition myths and truths. I literally took breadcrumbs of a very large picture. So we're going to get through this as much as possible. And I know there's going to be lots of questions. And like I said, most of the slides are just kind of the crumb on top of the cake. Each thing I talk about tonight could be its own session by itself. So we will get started. Who am I? Well, I guess I'll introduce myself real quick too. I know you guys got a little blurb about me. I graduated from Front Range Community College here in the Upper North Range of Colorado in Fort Collins in 2010. I got my AAS and certification in veterinary technology with honors. I've been a certified tech for about 12 years now, but I've been in the industry for about 15. I currently work as a lead tech at a general practice in Firestone, and then an ER technician once a week at a clinic here in my hometown. I have been not in a ton of practices, but my other practice before this general practice, I was a certified weight coach for about 3 years. They unfortunately had taken the program away. It was through Purina, so I've been working on getting that back through a different company, primarily working with small animals, dogs and cats. I also have my own professional pet sitting business that I've been doing for about 10 years. And then on the side, I'm also crazy and have about 12 animals of my own, 5 cats, 4 dogs, 2 chinchillas, and a rabbit. And then I love being in this industry, being a technician. And then I'm super excited about talking about nutrition with you guys tonight. So those are all my silly critters over here. I guess we'll just jump right in. So let's talk about grain-free. It is one of the biggest things that we get as technicians and vets as far as right now. Grain-free is a huge fad that kind of started, to be honest, probably about 6 or 7 years ago. I remember when I first started hearing about grain-free because gluten-free had started kind of hitting the market for people. And then it started just kind of catapulting into dogs and cats. Behind it though, however, there's a lot of things that are starting to be found now that were about 10 years into grain-free diets almost. So here's kind of these are just like the main myths that I typically hear from a lot of owners or just general public. So the first one is why we support grain-free. A lot of people are under the impression that their dog is allergic or cat is allergic to grains. Grains are bad because they're mostly wheat and corn. Grain-free is better for the dog's overall health. I have a couple owners I've had discussions with about celiac disease. Pet store owners, pet store associates are telling people, grains are bad because they're selling products that are grain-free. So they're trying to help you find a necessary diet that's going to be best for your pet. And a lot of pet owners are just under the impression that grains are really unnecessary anyway, because as we all want to go with is our canines have evolved from wolves. So, they're mostly carnivores. Again, this is just mainly the big topics of things that I hear from most of my pet sitting owners or owners in general, or, pet parents. So let's just kind of unpack this. This picture here is from a university veterinary hospital. They have their own website down here. I provided it with you. It's probably one of the better articles I've seen recently on grain-free and the bigger picture that we're going to focus on, which is the heart disease that has started cropping up recently as far as grain-free is concerned. So grain-free is currently defined as a product that doesn't contain any grains such as rice, corn, or wheat. Therefore, they substitute it with something that is similar, like a pea, legume, potatoes, lentils, etc. The reason that a lot of dry food needs to have these substances is because grains are actually what keep the dry kibble together. If you take away the grain, you don't have a kibble because you need something in there that's going to hold the food together. So when this started coming about, they tried to take a lot of the easier products to get and replace it with just different products that would probably appease people better. So they started substituting it with a couple things. However, as years have gone on, we've done a lot of studies as far as allergies. Allergies is a huge thing. That's a whole conversation in itself. But a lot of allergies do come from food. A lot of owners want to believe that grains are the cause of a lot of allergies in dogs. And while there is an allergy component for some pets, it's a very small component. So a lot of studies have actually shown that the biggest component to an allergy for a dog in food is going to be the protein. Typically for dogs, it's going to be like your chicken and beef-based foods because they're chronically being fed that type of diet as the meat base. And then for cats, it's going to be chicken and fish. Same reason. So typically a lot of companies will do more of like a novel protein, which means it's a protein that's very limited and less used. So you're looking at lamb and veal and rabbit. However, if we're using those meats as the base for food, of course, the cost of food will go up because they are not easy to get, even though, rabbits are everywhere, they're not going to use just any rabbit. So basically, as far as a study that was done in 2016, they took 297 dogs, fed them all various different foods. Most of them that did contain corn found that only 4% were allergic to corn. So it's a very small number that is allergic to the typical grain, like your corn and your wheat. Most of the testing on the dogs is also like a skin test, which is very, very specific. You have to get it set up with the dermatologist, and they go through and they kind of just doing the poking on the skin. I'm sure you guys have all seen that with the bumps and the reactions. So if it is going to be an issue, typically you need to take a little bit further diagnostics or even problem, or is it something else? When it does come to corn, I know it has like a bad name. A lot of people feel like corn has a really negative connotation. It's just an empty calorie, an empty filler, things like that. However, even though it's an insoluble fiber, something that we don't really break down, which is why a lot of, animals will defecate it in their feces or like people do. The biggest part of the corn is actually in the middle of the corn, which is the kernel. The kernel is a huge component to corn, and that is what provides the biggest bang for the buck as far as it's a good source of protein, a good source of carbs. It has a lot of vitamin B complexes, it has your antioxidants and fiber. So actually, when they're using corn and they're breaking it down already to help make the food, they're trying to already provide that nutrition to our pets without them having to eat a whole kernel of corn. The next big thing that we're starting to kind of find with our grain-free diets, recently, a lot of studies have started to be shown in the last couple of years because all of a sudden dogs that were outside of their normality to develop heart disease started developing heart disease. In dogs, there's a disease known as dilated cardiomyopathy, which is basically the thinning of the heart walls. The hearts become very enlarged and it becomes weakened, therefore not really circulating blood well or functioning right. So when we started noticing that the breeds that are more prone to heart disease, like it's our smaller dogs, Chihuahuas, Yorkies, Pomeranians, and then in our bigger dogs, it's usually Dobermans and Boxers. When we started all of a sudden getting these dogs that were kind of outside the box, like Heelers and Australian Shepherds, a lot of nutritionists started kind of digging into that. Like, what is the common denominator that all of a sudden we're seeing this? And about 80% of those dogs were starting to show that they were eating a grain-free diet. We're still delving into what the cause actually is. Is it the actual replacement of the peas with the actual grains that we were currently using, or is it causing a deficiency or an excess due to using these? They're still trying to connect those dots completely. Most of it they thought was a taurine deficiency, which is very common in cats. That is just an amino acid that they really need to process food and meat well and basically live life better. They thought that the same thing was happening with dogs, and then in conjunction with having the peas and legumes or the lentils added in, it was causing an issue. However, they're still trying to completely nail that down. So in the big spectrum of things, there's the biggest issue they're having right now is looking at the grain-free diet as one of our primary causes for causing, or at least leading to, dilated cardiomyopathy, but they're still trying to figure out what the main component of that is. At this time, however, a lot of veterinary nutritional specialists and a lot of vets have actually started to shy away from even recommending it. I know a good host of doctors I currently work with, we try to steer our owners away from even feeding it right now at all. If they're on it, we try to get them onto something just a little bit better that isn't going to contain that grain-free aspect to it, just to prevent any issues further down the road. So, just keep updated with what you can find. But like I said, the article down here was probably the best that really explained what dilated cardiomyopathy was for most of my owners. And it also explained what they're actually trying to look into for that comparison. The next myth, again, going into the celiac disease, that came up with the whole gluten issue as far as people developing celiac disease. Super huge in the world. As far as people, there's more people that do have it than pets, but however, it's still a very small number if you compare populations. Celiac disease is basically the inability to process gluten appropriately. So a lot of people thought that with the grain-free diets, we were getting and eliminating some of that gluten aspect. They did a big study on it to see if dogs actually even had the genome to develop celiac disease. And it was a very small percentage. Only about 1% of dogs actually develop celiac disease. And in that, they're usually in the United Kingdom. It looked like, from what I was reading on a couple studies, one was a group of inbred Irish setters, and then there's a couple terriers that actually carry the genome in Scotland. Other than that, most dogs do not have celiac disease. And to be honest, to really diagnose it takes a lot of money. And it's a very, very in-depth, in-depth study to actually figure out if your pet is going to have it or not. So generally that's kind of gotten knocked off the table as far as that even being a concern with the grain-free. And then these last two are just kind of like little blurbs. We love Pet Store Associates. I think they're great. They're great helping in the store. However, if you're really going to ask a certified, if you really want a nutritional, a very good piece of advice, store associates are probably not the best place to get it from. They get a lot of their education typically regurgitated from them from their reps because they're trying to sell us the food. We love the food. Here's what we can tell you about this food. This is why it's good for your dog. But if you actually try to delve into it, they're not going to have that specialty or that certification to really know how it's actually working in a pet's body. They're just trying to do what they know to do best to help pets. And that's great. But my best advice to most people is if you ever have a nutritional question, to just consult with your veterinarian or consult with a nutritional specialist or a veterinary staff member. I mean, that's what we're there for. I love to give everybody, just as much help as possible with picking the right diet for their pet. Even as far as going into looking at the diets and looking at what the components of them are for most of my owners. So your best form of advice is going to come from the vet who knows your pet, who knows how it works. So just take caution with Pet Store Associates. I know they're great at what they do. It's just, they also don't have the best advice. And last but not least, grains are actually incredibly essential to your pet's diet. While a lot of people believe that dogs want to be more carnivorous than omnivorous, unfortunately, they're omnivores, and even wolves are too. They love to eat not just their meat kill, but they will actually go into the intestinal contents of kills that they've had and eat the processed grains from them specifically. My cat really likes to be up here today. Um, so I would just do the best you can with understanding that our dogs do need these grains. They do need this element to their diet to give them the best well-balanced meal, as far as that goes. So that's the best, that's in a short version of the grain-free, delve into things. Because again, this itself could be a whole lecture on, diving into like what they are, how they work, all that stuff. Okay, so now we're going to get into another one. This is more of a controversy. Again, a lot of what I'm talking about is not, if you feed these items to your pets and stuff like that, that's great. I'm just going off of education science. This one is one of the more controversial things to talk about, but I feel like it's something to be shared. A lot of things, raw food diets are a big part of like my industry. Have a lot of owners, a lot of breeders that come to me that will, want to figure out like we should feed raw food. So a lot of the myths I do here, I feed raw food to my dog because they're like wolves. My pet does better on raw diets because it's more natural, grain-free. If people can eat raw food, my pet can too. A lot of my breeder friend, whatever, said that it was better than regular GMO dog food. Feeding raw food has really helped my pet's overall well-being. It contains all the nutrients and vitamins. And then again, the biggest thing I always hear is that they're like wolves. I wish I could believe that our wonderful, cute little like bulldog here could be, left in the wild. Unfortunately, we have bred most of our wolf ancestries out of most of our pets, as far as, Chihuahuas, bulldogs, French bulldogs, they're all, as much as I'd love to say that my Chihuahua could live in the wild, I don't think that would go very well. So over time, we've kind of pretty much erased most of the wolf lineage and genome out of their caricature. If you look at most of our pets today, it's really hard to kind of see that. And honestly, they've delved right into that and found that even the GI biome, which is the microbiome of the whole system in a dog's GI system, their flora, their guts, their insides are completely, they don't even have some of the same factors that wolves even have. So when it comes to our domesticated canines and our felines, they cannot really properly break down a raw food diet. Felines actually do it a little bit better, but canines specifically, they don't even have most of the enzymes in their GI biome to break down not just the whole, like if you actually gave your dog a carcass, it would not be able to really process that, but it can't break down all the bacteria. So the biggest thing with raw food that is coming up is that, one, it's a health risk. So that is straight across the board. It is a huge health risk for not just our pets, really, to be honest, but also to us. That's where like the biggest component comes to it. But the second biggest component aren't able to handle it. Most of our domesticated dogs actually have a higher genome in their biome, no, that rhymes, to break down starches. So, dog food. Whereas their wolf ancestors don't even have some of those components in their GI biome at all. They're meant to just eat meat and, carcasses and things like that. So when it comes to feeding raw food, the issue that really is begging a problem is just all the bacteria. They don't have the enzymes to break down all that bacteria, which then can lead to an overabundance of it. So a lot of pet owners if they are feeding raw diets, need to take heed with a lot of like health code stuff, like using gloves, cleaning off everything. And I'm talking about bowls, toys. Don't usually even recommend giving dogs toys after they've eaten their food. You need to wait a little bit because that bacteria can transmit to a lot of the stuff they're like putting their mouth on. Of course, feces. So a big study was done, and that's what a lot of my references are coming from. There's a study done back in like 2014-13 area where they studied a lot of the stools coming from dogs who were primarily fed raw food diets, and they tended to have a heavy burden of E. coli or salmonella or even listeria. While some dogs have been able to handle that balance, they just were able to develop a symbiotic relationship with it. Some pets can actually succumb to that and develop really bad like diarrhea, and develop overall like an E. coli overload. Some pets have been hospitalized. In one of the studies that I believe I referenced here, it even showed that a couple pregnant bitches who had eaten just primarily raw food had spontaneous abortions. Whether that was because of the bacteria, or it's just the fact that it's not very balanced, which is another issue that you tend to run into with our raw feedings, is that dogs need a very strict, well-balanced diet. They need to have a certain amount of calcium, magnesium, vitamin A, D, E, K, all needs to be encompassed in feeding these diets, because even if you're feeding this and you're like, well, this has everything in it, that could be an issue in itself. If you have too much of something, that could be a problem. If you don't have enough of something, that's a really big problem. Or if you're feeding inappropriate meat, if it's cross-contaminated with heart meat or thyroid meat, you can actually cause thyroid issues or heart problems, because those meats are organ meats. They tend to have a lot different cells and way that they work in the body. So the issue that we run into a lot with the raw is just there's either too much or not enough. Again, it comes down to the bacteria part. And it's just hasn't been really, as far as most of the studies I've read, and this is over lots of years, coming from veterinary journals and even through VIN, which is a veterinary network in itself, I haven't found a good article that fully supports it being a well-balanced diet for a pet. And yes, I can definitely see that it does help pets like overall joint health and hair health and all that stuff. I've seen the other side where like typically you got to stay away from like their mouth, their feces. There's just a health issue. A lot of boarding facilities won't even board dogs if they're fed freeze dried or raw diets, just because of the health risk that it runs for the staff, the pets and stuff like that. So if this is something that a pet owner is doing and your pet sitting, my biggest recommendation is just make sure you're keeping yourself safe by really being cleanly, cleaning everything you're putting the food on, cleaning food dishes afterwards and deep sterilizing them, making sure that you're taking care of their toys appropriately. I tend to really not let these pets particularly lick me or anything like that, just because they tend to house a lot more bacteria in their mouth than the standard dog, fed a standard diet. So just take a lot of, heat at that, and just do the best you can. But as far as this goes, this is something that, I definitely recommend consulting with your veterinarian or a veterinary nutritionist on to get just better information if this is going to work for your pet or for yourself at this time. So that kind of concludes that. And so now we're on to, we've gone through that, what is recommended. Of course, a lot of the diets we're going to recommend are typically over-the-counter foods. So a lot of things that I run into with a lot of owners, so typically is, commercial dog food and over-the-counter dog food or OTC foods contain a lot of like byproducts and unnecessary fillers. Commercial dog food uses a lot of animal testing and leftover parts. Commercial and prescription foods are a scam. A lot of pets have died from over-the-counter diets. So how are they better if there's so many recalls? I'll touch just shortly on like home prepared diets because some people believe, it's still better, but sometimes it cooks out everything. And then most over the counter food companies, just want money. These are just some of the myths that I hear again of everything. So kind of getting into this, as far as most dry food and or prescription diets go, your over the counters or prescription diets go, there's a couple safety nets that we can utilize to keep them as up to code, up to safety protocols, and up to a well-balanced diet as possible. Typically, they're mostly regulated, at least in the United States, by AAFCO, which is the Association of American Feed Officials, or by the FDA themselves, Food and Drug Administration. However, really the hard part about this is anybody can really make a diet. You just have to go online and literally like follow all these protocols and submit it to both these companies. And as long as it meets relatively all the requirements of these companies, they can be distributed. But there are some caveats and under the rug kind of things that can happen is once it's processed, then they can just kind of keep going with it and add things, take away things. Careful with what the food is actually, containing or not containing. However, I can say most foods, so delving right into the byproduct definition, which is just what is left over after a product's been made that is not used for human consumption. A lot of people take that really, really crazy and go into like, oh, well, they're adding in like horse hooves and beaks and feathers and chicken legs and things like that. That's not the case. Usually it's just like the skim meats of like thighs and, breast meat and things that like wouldn't necessarily go into human consumption. They cannot put organ meat in there generally. And so typically it's just leftover like meat. Sometimes they do use bone meal, which is crushed bone. And that's typically for our diets that are going to contain something that's going to be used for like, bone health, bone and joint health. Studies have shown that some bone meal products at a right percentage can actually be used as like a glucosamine supplementation in food to help with dogs' joints and or cats' joints. So, and as far as feathers go, there's only one like really expensive product on the market that uses the protein from feathers to be made. And I can get into that in just a little bit. Filler is another big word that gets used a lot. Again, that actually kind of goes more into the grains. It's usually a lower quality as well. This is the only definition I could find, which is interesting. Bulky, starchy ingredient that could be replaced by something different, which is kind of they're trying to do with the grain-free stuff. However, I mean, the filler in general is basically, again, we're getting into the corn, the wheat, even the peas, the lentils, all that stuff. It's what's used to keep the food together. If you take the food away, if the filler is gone, you're not going to have the dry food component. It'll just fall apart. So while they have a lot of like these negative connotations to them, it's really just leftover and grains that are used to provide the nutritional supplementation that our pets are not going to get if we just kind of cooked it all through or didn't really add that in there. So I provided this link down here for you guys because again, we could get into labeling of pet food. That's a whole thing in itself. Trying to figure out like, because if they word food a certain way, if certain things are on a label, it will actually talk about the percentage that's actually used in the diet, which is very strange. Again, that's a whole lecture in itself of labeling on dog foods. So I put this down here for you guys because it's just a little toolkit to use. You can print it out. You can utilize it even with your pet sitting clients. I've utilized it a couple times. But if an owner is just asking you, like, what do I look for when I'm trying to find a good quality food? It has some guidelines for people to follow. Do they have a nutritionist on board? If you call them and you ask them all these questions, are they going to be able to answer them? I will tell you for sure, I've done this, I've printed this out, and for my pets, my owners or pet owners that are asking me like what I recommend, and they give me diets that I've never really heard of, I will call the companies myself and I will ask them these forward, like, where are you guys getting your studies from? Like, how, how many studies have you done? Some are willing to share that information with you and email it to you. If they don't, I would definitely take heed on the diet that you're using, because they should be willing to provide all this information. And that's what I'm saying, like they can go through AFCO and FDA and they get processed and go and go and go. But after a while, it's like some things start taking, a back burner. So if you actually really want to know if this is a very well balanced and good nutritional diet for your pet, call the company, ask some questions. The Wasava provided a great little guide for all of anybody to use, really. The other thing I have shown up here is, again, it's another way to help everybody feel a little comfortable with their pet food that they're feeding, is most dog foods and cat foods, if they've gone through the appropriate trials, will have on their bag this statement from AFCO saying that they've done everything they need to do and it's been approved by AFCO and it's a well-balanced and fit diet for your pet. Again, do your research the best you can. And again, use your veterinary team to help you make that best decision as well. Okay, so a couple other things here. Just delving a little bit into prescription diets, because I'm sure a lot of us have come across that, or, when we're pet sitting, the more and more our society gets involved with our pets, the more and more our standard of care has been definitely changing. I'll tell you for sure in the last 10 years, it's totally different. Diets have been utilized for a lot of things, but now more and more they're used as a medicine for our pets. Unfortunately, we can't do what we do with people. Oh, you're diabetic. Here's your list of foods you can eat. This is what you need to do to get the diabetes under control. This is what you have to follow. We can't do that for our pets, unfortunately. So that's why prescription diets started to be made, because we needed a very specific diet to help with the dog or cat's disease processing. The reason they're prescription, I get a lot of owners that get a little grumpy with like, well, why do I need a prescription for this? Or why do I need to go through all this, hassle to get this type of food? Is because the prescription diet is not made for a dog who has a happy, healthy lifestyle. You're not going to feed a happy, healthy puppy something that you would feed a dog who's in kidney disease, because with prescription diets, the standards that they follow is completely different than your over-the-counter diet. So for instance, if I have a dog who has kidney disease, the protein that is allotted in the food is a very, very significant decrease than a dog who's getting something from over the counter. If a healthy dog tries to eat a kidney disease diet, they are not going to get the proper protein that they need to grow and, live a healthier lifestyle. So if your dog or pet or cat is having a disease processing and they need to be on a prescription diet, it's because an over-the-counter diet is not, as far as, the regulations between AFCO and FDA are concerned, cannot be made at minimal levels. My best example that I've ever had with prescription diets was I had a client whose dog had heart disease. It was a little mini poodle, very significant heart disease. He ended up running out of his diet. He thought he could get by through the weekend. He went to the pet store. The pet store associate, kind of on his behalf, a prescription diet. Don't listen to your vet. You can feed him this diet. It has a lower sodium, when in fact, no over-the-counter diet can be made with the minimal amount of sodium needed for a well-balanced diet and a healthy pet. So when he had called me the following week to tell me, you know, what happened, because he was still questioning it, but he needed to feed her. I was like, I'm really glad it was only a few days, because had he continued to just keep feeding an over-the-counter diet, it could have shortened his dog's life substantially, because the amount of sodium that's needed for a dog in actual like heart failure, very, very severe heart disease, it was like 4 times the amount that she needed. So the reason these diets are made is because of that, is because you need to make sure you're having your pet monitored appropriately to be on these diets. The only other one that definitely gets people a lot is like, you know, hypoallergenic diets, what makes them different. Well, the reason you're not going to get these over the counter is because in order to make both of these, the only few that I know that are made in a hypoallergenic fashion is these companies shut down their facilities, like when they're getting ready to process this food, or they have completely different facilities where they will sterilize their machinery, run their food for the hypoallergenic diets, which is usually a hydrolyzed protein derived from chicken. It's the smallest molecule they can get so that the dog doesn't realize it's an allergy. And they'll run that food. And then if they don't have a separate facility, they'll run the other food behind it, or they just continue to run it in a separate facility where it can continually be sterilized and made. So that way, a dog who does have a food allergy isn't going to have cross contamination that you would get from your over-the-counter diets. Most of these companies just don't have the manpower, they don't have the money to make a true prescription diet that's hydrolyzed and hypoallergenic, which is why you'll run into a lot of limited ingredient or LID foods. Those are generally okay if a dog has a very minimal allergy to protein. They do the best they can, but that protein molecule will always stay the same size, and they do still have risk of cross-contamination. So that's why they don't always help if a dog is severely allergic to food, but they do the best they can. Homemade diets were one of the most interesting ones I got to learn about. So I interned under Dr. Stockman, who is a board certified nutritional specialist here at CSU, for about 6 months. He's on to bigger and better things in a different state now, but a lot of his experience was to help owners make proper homemade diets, because the scary thing is now we have Google and everybody has put everything out there, but you need to be very, very careful. Again, it's like the raw feeding where a lot of minerals and nutrients can go in excess or in deficiency. So he would actually talk with owners, see what they want. What do you want to feed? Because it's also very expensive to feed homemade and or raw. And it depends on what you were trying to accomplish. So he would go through, make a game plan with the owner, put it in a computer system, and voila, we have it. But then you also had to supplement those diets either with a powder that is specifically formulated to go in the food to give a complete what he calculated, or you would actually have, he would give you a sheet that told you all the supplements you would then have to go buy and you would have to add to the diet to make it well balanced for the pet to have a healthier lifestyle. If there's a disease process on top of that, definitely strongly recommend consulting with a veterinary nutritional specialist, because they have even more of a strict, like, this is how much sodium you need, this is how much magnesium you need. It's all very calculated to the the minute points of the diet. I know there's a lot of new diets out there that are kind of going crazy. The ones that get shipped to your house, I think one is called Farmer's Dog or something like that. To be very honest, I haven't looked very thoroughly into that. I don't actually know if they have a nutritional specialist on board. They might. If they did, I have a couple pet sitting clients on it. I've talked to some of the owners about, like, have you consulted with your veterinarian? They tell me yes, I don't know if they have, but in a nutshell, it's just, again, coming back to that. It's always good to consult with your veterinarian or veterinary care staff to help you make the right decisions. This is just my last little blip here. I know everybody wants to bring money into this, and yes, it probably is a big part of things. A lot of the companies I've personally talked to, unfortunately, you kind of do need the money to run the foods they have. So regardless, I've seen a lot of over-the-counter foods cost just as much as a prescription diet you would get from us. So at this point, it's just kind of like, I feel like that's a moot point. It's not going to go anywhere. Recalls, lawsuits, you got to do your own research into that. Recalls, I find, is just a way to, basically, it's a fail safe. So if something isn't going right, I like that a company does have recalls, because that means they are being notified that something is completely wrong. It's not doing good. And we need to fix it now before either several other dogs are either harmed if they find out about it, or, we got to figure out what's going on. Again, that's also gone into, you got to go into your own research on what actually happened. Most companies do have to air out their dirty laundry. So you do the best at sifting through that you can. And then, as far as lawsuits go, that's all dependable. There's he said, she said things. So again, that takes more into accountability of looking into that as well. So do your best with a lot of this information. I know this is a lot. Here are my references. This is just a few of a lot that I've utilized over the years. And do the best you can, but utilize your veterinarians or your patients' veterinarians if you have to. We are the advocates for them. So if you ever have a question or concern, call their vet, call your vet, just kind of throw some stuff off of them. Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And just kind of do the best you can with that. So I know that was a lot of information. I've left us, I hope, enough time to go over some questions and just kind of go from there. And again, I thank you guys for sharing your time with me and kind of nerding out a little bit. And sorry, it's a small amount of information in a short time. But again, all of those could be lectures in themselves. So thank you so much.
Oh, no, thank you. For some of the links that you have in your course, because we can't click on them, could you provide them to in an email? For us to, give it to Kathy tomorrow, just send her an email like, hey, here's the links. And if you could also share your reference page too.
You got it
as well. That would be really great.
Yeah,
and she can put that in the email.
You got it.
I have a question.
Sure.
So how did you become a nutritionist and get involved in this? Is there classes or you could get involved with?
There is a whole process in it. I went through and became a weight coach. Like I said, I really wanted to get my specialty in nutrition. Unfortunately, it's not built very well. It actually got a lot better. So I'm actually planning on, hopefully in the next couple of years, to go through it again. But there is a process to becoming a nutritional specialist as a technician. I have to go through and do a bunch of case studies on my own. I have to write probably 5 or 6 proper case studies that have to be presented. And then on top of that, I do 50 micro case studies of like just various different types of diseases and things that I've seen. And then after that, I have a skill list that I have to go through on various different skills as far as, placing N tubes, which is a nasal gastric tube, placing a esophageal tube, learning about, doing proper parenteral nutrition, which is what is given through either of those devices. If I have to give it, calculating calories. I did a whole weight management program. So it is very extensive. I had to collect a lot of information and go through it. I did this about a few years ago. I had attempted my first time. It was my first run through trying to get this specialty. I think they realized there was not, a lot of us weren't very successful in getting in. I had a couple holes in some of my case studies that I didn't have any mentorship for. So now they've actually instilled a mentorship program while you're doing your specialty. So I'm hoping in the next year, I will go through that again, because it does take like a whole year of me consistently concentrating in nutrition and then
So
going
you
from there.
took a vet, so you as a vet tech, you took classes to specialize in nutrition.
Yes.
So it's above and beyond what?
Yes. I had
Okay.
to take, usually to keep my certification as a tech, I need at least 22 hours, like continuing education every 2 years. For my specialty, to get it, I took an additional 30 credit hours on top of that, which I've honestly still continued to try to do to keep up with the nutritional changes over the years.
Okay, and then I have a question. So like
Yeah.
the new thing at the, pet stores is that they have like that raw bar with like the pig ears and all that stuff. Is that also considered a part of like raw, like you should be washing everything down? Or
Um,
yeah,
I would say that is a great question, because in a way it does have, they do still have bacteria. Even the freeze dried stuff, a lot of people want to believe that, oh, once it's in the freezer it kills off everything. Not really. Actually, Demon in the Freezer is the best book I always like utilize for that, because the CDC will actually like keep things in the freezer to bring them out, to bring them alive again. So that's how they keep studying viruses and diseases and bacteria, because killing it in the freezer doesn't really work ever. You have to boil and cook it out to get rid of the bacteria. With the pig ears, bully sticks, things like that, it's kind of like that has its own thing too. Yes, it does have bacteria on it. I definitely tell owners to be really, really careful, like when you're picking it up and messing with it, to really wash your hands. It doesn't typically have as high of a bar of bacteria on it, but over time, when they keep chewing it and gnawing on it and stuff, it just festers more. The other issue you run into in general with those things is the foreign body component to it. That in itself is a whole nother thing. That I've seen a couple foreign bodies from, like pig ears and bully sticks, where they're taking chunks off of it and swallowing them. The problem with that is that the stomach takes a lot of time to digest and break that down. It would be similar to like us swallowing gum in a way. So if they're taking off chunks of that, the body doesn't have the proper time to wholly break it down. And so what can happen is that stuff kind of congeals and it can form a foreign body. So that in itself is the whole issue. And if I have an owner using it, to definitely keep an eye on them chewing on it. And when it gets really small, or you notice they're tearing off big chunks, I would just toss it, because you're just going to have a foreign body problem anyway if it keeps being eaten.
you may also have any questions. Put them in the chat and I'll read them out. Anybody? Okay. No one has any questions.
Hey, cool.
A lot of people, they say great job. I'm very interested in your studies. You definitely have gave me a lot of new knowledge. Definitely gonna have to listen to it probably a couple of times, because you went over a lot of stuff, but very informational. It takes me like 3 or 4 times to digest information. So
Sure.
yeah, so I'm now not giving my dog those freeze-dried things that I was giving him to her before. Yes. So, all right. Well, since
Awesome.
that's about it, so I want to thank everyone for attending tonight. We will be back here again next month. I think we're talking about horses next month. So, someone else is very informative. Thank you so very much. Thank you,
Yeah,
Jade. I appreciate your time and everyone else's time for attending. Thank you so much.
absolutely.
And I wish you all good evening, and I will wish you all warm weather, and I'll talk to you all soon.
Great.
Bye.
Thank you guys again. I appreciate your time.
Bye.
Have a good night. Bye.